on a 250 head, a Chevy 250 straight 6 head has already been removed from the engine. The tools that I'm using are, of course, the lever to compress the string, the springs, some pliers, a hammer, and to knock the spring loose from the keepers, and ratchet. It's 5/8 inch if I remember right, and something to pry with, and of course rags. So here's the block. I had removed the head for an unrelated reason, and I noticed that the back piston had more oil deposits than the other pistons. The engine still needs to be cleaned off before I put the head gasket back on, and the piston's cleared out to reduce the possibility of damage to the valves and so on, but it'll get there. The middle two pistons are higher compression when I did the compression test, and that's probably why they're cleaner, whereas the back two are at 160 psi. So it's got decent compression for its age, and it runs fine, so it's still worth using without a rebuild. And I'm guessing it's just a valve stem seal in the back, and since I had the head off anyway, it'd be a lot easier this way to change the valve stem seals. So often when people replace valve stem seals, they'll use some kind of adapter, like from a compression gauge, and hook up an air compressor to the spark plug holes when both valves are closed, in order to get the valves. The danger with this method is if you let go of the valve, then it might drop into the combustion chamber and cylinder, and you'll have to pull the head off anyway in that case. Another method is to use a rope in the spark plug hole, a lot of rope. It's a long length of rope that's not compressed easily. Okay, so I have this bigger bracket clamping the head to the steel table, so that when I use this tool to pry the springs down, then it won't make the cylinder head move around. And then I have the valves clamped closed for both of these valves are the number 5 cylinder, and so I have a clamp holding both of those down with a bracket spreading, and so I've already done all these, and now I have 3 valves left to do, and I'll do this one right here. These nuts have a nylon ring, and so the nylon ring keeps it in place so that it doesn't go out of adjustment. You could just see, I think they call these aircraft nuts. And then as I go, I clean the parts, because it's a good opportunity to get rid of the sludge that builds up, and also if my hands are cleaner, then they're able to hold on to things better and not smear grease all over the tools. I think it just works out better that way. Now while the head is off, this is a good time to clean up any sludge that might be there, because if you do the wipe down the sludge in the valve train while the head is on the vehicle, there's a big risk of some of the sludge falling down the passages, like right here, and you can't see it probably, but basically down the push rod holes and the oil return hole to the I can't remember the term now, oil pan. So if the sludge starts circulating, it could block off a small passage and kill the engine pretty much, potentially. So it is important not to knock sludge loose while the engine's together, and since it's apart, it's a great opportunity. If you get the engine from somebody else who didn't change the oil regularly enough. So, this area right here, where the keepers are, it doesn't get much oil circulation, so sometimes the metal parts stick together. In order to break it loose, don't hammer on the valve itself, but on the spring, and one of the when it looks like the spring is moving around, then it's probably loose enough. So now I could use this lever and push it down, and the valve stays in place now that it's broken loose and being held by the clamp. These are the keepers. There's just a notch in the valve stem, and this has a little notch inside, a thin end and a thick end, and that's how it keeps the valve in place. Now, this spring is going to be, since it hasn't gotten much oil circulation in some of the parts, it's stuck. It's been in there a long time, and might be a little sludge holding it in place too. So I leave the lever there, and I'm careful not. This metal right here at the cap is thin, so I stick it there in the spring and pop it loose. There's probably a better tool. I'm sure there's a better tool for it. I just didn't buy it. I don't do this often enough that I think I really need to spend the money for it. I don't know if it'll show up on the camera, but the old valve stem seal is actually disintegrated a little bit, it looks like. Yeah, it disintegrated. So if that wasn't leaking oil already, it was going to start pretty soon. And while I have the all this stuff off, it's a good opportunity to wipe it down a little bit. And then I clean up the holes for the head bolts, because having gunk in the way can affect the um, torque readings when you torque down the head bolts. So you want the threads clean when you put the head back together, and this won't hurt having those clean too. Okay, so now I've wiped this clean, this area, well, not perfectly clean, but just wiped up most of the gunk that'll cause a problem, and I'm ready for reassembly. Since I cleaned off the various components, if I don't put some kind of lubrication back on, then it'll wear for when I start back up. It'll cause a little bit of extra wear. So if you want the parts to last longer, it's better to use something like this, either engine oil or engine assembly lube. This lube is supposed to disintegrate when oil starts flowing through it, so it doesn't block the oil. That's my understanding, at least. So just wipe some around there. I'm in the habit of lubricating O-rings before I put them on. Oh, I scared myself for a minute. There are only 2 valve stems left in this package, but I forgot the wind blew it and one of the seals came out of the box, or bag. And so it's going to be a short one. It's starting to freak out. So I put it on in the second notch. The top notch is for the keeper. Spin it around a little bit, make sure it's seated in there properly. And some people probably don't lubricate the tips of the spring, but might as well. Any moving parts I'll lubricate just to be safe. It's not really that big of a hassle to smear some engine assembly lube on it. And now it's time to put the lever back on. If you're not worried about wiping down the valve train underneath the valve cover, then you don't have to take the extra step of pulling the lever off. So there's a thick end and a thin end on this. Thin end goes down and just bring it down far enough for it to fit into the notch, and then once again center it so that it's not interfering with the keeper, and line the other keeper up with the other side and put it in the notch, and that part's done. Now for the rocker arm. Once again, it's important to lube up the rocker arm well. This is where the push rod goes. Then this is where it pushes against the valve stem here. And then I just put it around here, since that's where the pivot point is. And then right in here, which is where this part goes. just you don't want to tighten this nut all the way at this point, because one, it's never going to be tightened down all the way anyway, probably, because you have to adjust it once you have the valve train back together with the push rod and everything, and when the valves and when the camshaft and the crankshaft are lined up properly, then you adjust it to the right place, which will be another video. So here I just turn it a couple times. So it's in place and won't come off, and then I'll finish adjusting it once it's ready, once it's back in place. If you adjust it any more than this, you're not getting the push rods back in on most of those valves, and you'll have to loosen it anyway. So that's getting the valve stem seals. Okay, so earlier I mentioned that number 6 cylinder was leaking oil, and that's what got me to change the valve stem seals in the first place. If you see here, this top notch right here is where the keeper notch is, and that's where you compress the springs and put the keeper in there to hold the spring in place. Now the second notch, and remember, keep in mind I did not remove that. I haven't even cleaned it yet. This valve stem seal had broken in half, and half of it was missing, and that is why on the exhaust valve, the right here, exhaust, and then with this double passage, that's the intake for this valve right here. So this exhaust valve on number 6 was, the valve stem seal was clearly broken, and that's where all the oil was getting into the combustion chamber. Another thing to check before putting the head on after doing the valve stem seal job is how far these valves are sticking out. They're supposed to stick out a little bit. Like here, this is good. This was actually number 6. You can see them sticking out. That's the valve stem, or the valve seat. Looks like it's probably okay on these, in my amateur opinion. Machinist who's been training it would know there's probably specifications for how far they should be sticking out. You can tell on this one that it's not sticking out as far, but still sticking out. It's not flush with the top of the combustion chamber. And anyways, the compression pressure readings were decent, all above 160, and there's some borderline variance, but it still runs good. So these valves are mostly okay. They're good enough. It doesn't need a valve job at this point, I don't think.